you can't actually remove complexity from engineering. All of that needs to get done. All you're doing is abstracting it away and giving it to someone else. The answer there is really to identify the pain that hurts the most. I would bet in a lot of organizations it has nothing to do with needing faster typers. And
welcome, folks. I'm Ankit, founder of Aviator. We build developer productivity tools, and we also run a HangarDX podcast. Today with us, we have Chris Westerhold. We're doing a special episode focused around the sentiments on DevEx for AI and how organizations are adopting AI tools. Before we get started, Chris, please introduce yourself.
So it's great to be here. Thanks for having me. Chris Westerhold. I am one of the global practice directors at Thoughtworks, focusing on kind of engineering excellence and AI first software engineering transformation, and how do you really get the maximum value out of the ever decreasing investments that you have in kind of software engineering, but the ever ratcheting up, expectations from an efficiency perspective. So this is a topic kind of near and dear to my heart. So thanks for having me on to chat about it.
Amazing. And Chris, we did a podcast maybe 8 months ago, and I feel like the entire software industry has changed quite a lot. So this is going to be definitely very interesting session to dive into. And I feel like with AI itself being such a hype, there is so many interesting aspects of it, like both emotional and economical, that come into the play. So maybe let's just think about, right? When we think of DevEx, today DevEx feels very different than almost even a year ago. For folks who are not familiar, DevEx is developer experience. But today, when we talk to anyone, you can't say a statement about DevEx without using AI. So maybe just start there. Like, what's going on in the industry, and how should organization make sense of it?
Yeah, I agree with all of that. I mean, as we're sitting here on a Thursday afternoon, this is my theory on it at this exact moment. It is probably due to change in the next hour. But developer experience has been an interesting topic for a long time around, when it comes to productivity and those types of things. But even now, with the advent of AI and really the kind of the normalization of a lot of these tools, even the concept of the word developer is starting to change. And so when you think about developer experience, it's not so much necessarily what you would traditionally think of as a developer. You're now bringing in designers and product people, and you're having, instead of getting epics and stories and everything from your product group, you're now getting working POCs, janky code bases, if we're going to be honest about it. But it's a different way of thinking about things. And so when you think about an already complex topic like developer experience, it becomes even harder to think about when you want to bring in other people into the fold. And it's really changing the way that we develop software just in general.
So one of the things that we want to dive into specifically here is the proliferation of tools. Like almost every day, I feel like we find new tools, and everyone is excited about like using everything new. So there is two aspects to it. One is, as a developer, what really makes me excited about using these tools, right? Like there's a new way of doing software engineering, and we have talked about it, and like I've written about it also in the past. But there's also like a pressure in leadership. I feel like it's almost driven by a FOMO, which is like, oh, if you're not using AI tools, we're going to get left behind, which is also, I feel, driving a lot of adoption of AI tools. So maybe a good question to think about is, how should we better understand when to introduce a new tool or kind of like improving an existing workflow? What could be a good framework to think about as an organization?
Yeah, that's a really, really great question. So there's a couple of different models that you can take depending on exactly what industry you're in. Like, are you highly regulated or those types of things? But there's really two different paths that people tend to take. It's, I have a relationship with Microsoft, so I go by Copilot. I have a relationship with whomever, and so I go by whatever tool. And then I bring that tool and I tell everyone that they have to use it. You're going to get less than ideal results from that. Not because I'm saying any of those tools are bad per se, but the market, and again, the way we're thinking about it and the way we're operating is changing so quickly that it's impossible for any of these people to keep up. And a second model, and the model that I've actually seen work really well, is this kind of open door for newer tools and allowing those early adopters to try them, adopt them, and chew up and spit out the ones that don't work and try to identify and find the things that do. And that's where you're really solving a couple of problems with that. One, you're giving people a level of autonomy to help improve their own job and to get to that efficiency that everybody really cares about. And two, you're not having to spend so much of this like centralized team time to be able to go and analyze all of these different tools to figure out what is and isn't working. The other thing that this kind of also stops is this favoritism towards the things that you just like. And it's like, well, I like Anthropic better than OpenAI. Why we have teams for this, I'm not sure, but just go on Reddit and you'll find it. But there's you end up with this weird kind of favoritism that says, oh, well, I like this better, so I want to do this. I think Windsurf is better than Cursor, so I think we should have everybody use Windsurf. And those are generally rooted in feelings and not rooted in reality. And trying to do a tooling comparison or like a technological comparison across them is less and less of a thing as days go by. They're becoming quite feature comparable. The models that are being used are all coming from the big AI shops, and you're seeing this kind of consolidation across them. So in the end, like, you're going to need to figure out which one that you want. What you want to do is, instead of focusing on the tool, because like this is probably the biggest anti-pattern that I see, people focusing on the tools. Like, don't focus on the tools, focus on the thing that you're actually trying to solve. Are you trying to do better testing? Are you trying to do better PRs? Are you trying to do better code generation, documentation? Like, what's the thing that you actually want to solve? Then figure out a way to actually bring that into your overall process. Because if you're not focusing on that, all you're actually doing is just making your developer experience worse. It's, hey, here's this landscape of 100 tools. Good luck. And they actually don't really solve anything in particular. They're just interesting tools that you can fiddle around with. And that doesn't get you to your organizational goals. And so if you're not thinking about it that way, you're really going to struggle to get adoption, to get to any kind of realizable value. And at the end, like, the boards of our companies are all going to come eventually and say, what did you do with all the money I gave you?
So it's there's a lot of interesting things I want to cover, but let's start with a couple of them, right? There is a lot of talks these days about this utopian world where you don't need software engineers, where life is like so pleasant. Everyone builds software, ships software. Everyone has like their own customized version of every product. At the same time, it feels like software engineers' life is getting worse sometimes, where it's like there is so much cognitive load, so much complexity. There's this whole promise of, oh, it reduces complexity. I feel like we're adding more rather than reducing it, right? I mean, obviously, there's going to be a lot more code to be created, which means there's going to be a lot more things to be reviewed. I feel like fundamentally, yes, as software engineer, the role is changing. A role is changing from not just writing code, right? It's more about now really understanding business value, understanding requirements, and doing verification, right? So that I understand, and I think it definitely adds a lot of value. But at the same time, one thing which is completely undersold in the AI utopian world is the complexity that it brings in, right? And especially if you talk about all these, hundreds of different AI tools, like if you tell everyone go try out different tools, everyone may try out different tools. And now you have, we used to have maybe 20 tabs open in Chrome, and now you will have 50 tabs open in Chrome. And you'll probably have 5 different IDs you're using at any time. So how should we think about the cognitive load and the complexity that comes with AI? And is there a way to mitigate that?
Yeah, that's a great question. I was having this chat with another group of people internally at Thoughtworks, and the question, or really the output of that, was like, you can't actually remove complexity from engineering. All of that needs to get done. all you're doing is abstracting it away and giving it to someone else. Because the complexity still exists. We still have to do all of the things that we have to do. And if you're going to go to this kind of AI utopia of we don't need software developers, well, there's a whole lot of other things that you actually need to make that happen. So you're going to need to create the agents. You're going to need to train the agents. You're going to need to have levels of observability to make sure that the infrastructure is working and all of those different bits. You're going to need to have better FinOps controls to understand cost and complexity. You're going to have to manage what models do they use. You're going to have now different sets of audits to be able to audit the reasoning that they have to make a certain set of decisions. You have all of this other complexity that existed but didn't exist. It existed in the world before, but you could get away with not doing it very well. You now need layers of governance that you didn't have before, where like I've been talking a lot about this kind of incident management process, like agentic incident management. And I'm using it as an example for a lot of ways, but like one of the things that you could do is say, hey, I want to create an agent that can go, like when an incident happens, it can go pull information from my infrastructure. It can go to my knowledge and grab me a bunch of knowledge from there. It can get information from my observability platform and create a report for me to look at to help me resolve this incident as quickly as I can. Great use case. Well, the second part of that would be, well, then how do you actually stabilize your system? Well, what would stop you from creating another agent or set of agents that then have the ability to toggle feature flags via MCP, do a literal rollback from blue to green, or to notify some people? And on paper, you go, oh yeah, that sounds really great. I can get to stability, which is what I want during an incident. Well, you have now given an agent the ability to turn off and on features inside of your application and to roll back releases. So what's going to happen if that goes wrong? What audits are you going to have in place? What costs and governance structure and all of these different things that you would want to think of that you would have to have in place to de-risk some of those things? And a lot of that is additional layers of complexity that a lot of people aren't talking about when it comes to this agentic future. They're just like, "Oh, great! You can replace me with a slide creation agent. Great." But that's not, to me, is not the problem, right? It's like writing a line of code isn't the problem. It's the complexity of the system and everything that goes along with that. And to me, trying to automate a lot of that stuff is far more complex. And, lots of studies have come out here recently that show that the higher that complexity curve goes, the ability for some of these agents to be able to complete these tasks essentially falls off a cliff. And so where do you want to draw the line on risk levels, essentially? Like, how far do you want to go? Like, and what happens when things go wrong is that layer. And that's why I tend to, especially right now, lean more towards the AI augmented view that says, just like a mathematician still needs to know math. Like if you're a physicist, you're going to have to know some math. But guess what? You have a calculator that can help. You can do modeling with your computer and you can do those interesting things, but you're still the one that's making it happen. You're just not having to grab your abacus and start, cranking out complex algebra. And so it allows you to be able to focus on the things that matter. And so for like, if you have kind of the known problems, great, throw an agent at it, make that problem essentially go away. But for the things that are kind of the known unknowns and the, unknown knowns and those other things, that's where that stuff doesn't just go away because you want it to go.
Interesting. So there are a couple of other examples I would probably bring in for complexity, and I feel like it's related to some of the things you mentioned. For instance, incident management is a great example, right? Some of the things that I've noticed in my conversations, people who are trying out these, there's like almost like a genre called AI SRE, like tools who are trying to kind of like help investigate. One of the interesting patterns there is these tools are really great at identifying anomalies and things that are changing. But the problem is when an incident happens, there's a lot of like context and intuition that goes into identifying the root cause. One thing which AISRE tools do, for instance, is they'll show you like 20 different things. Hey, these are a list of everything that could have gone wrong, right? Versus many times it's as trivial as like, oh yes, like I made a change last week that would have kind of like caused this issue, and like just based on that context you can easily fix that. Versus with AI you sometimes get so much more information, and I feel like that itself becomes more complex as you keep on adding more agents. Right now you're looking at like there's an agent looking at your CPU usage, one looking at like your central error logs, one looking at like all your application logs, right? Like one looking at like your response time. So like you might see like 20 different metrics where you probably only just need to see one. So this creates a lot more complexity as well. The other example I think that you brought up, which is MCPs, we've already noticed that once you go past like 20-30 different tools, your context window reduces so much that the ability of an AI agent to be able to call tools effectively goes down significantly. And it's possible some of this context window challenges will improve over time. But like today, there is definitely a lot more limitations in what these AI tools can do very accurately. I think it brings to an interesting perspective that I have where I feel we are not spending enough time, which is instead of being very broad in terms of what AI can do, can we help figure out how to get like focused answers and more concrete results? I don't know if there's any AI tools who are focused on that, right? Like, I mean, there is summarization, which generally AI is really good at. I use that very heavily. But if we think about developer workflows, actually knowing one right answer is better than knowing 10 possibly right answers. That's actually a big challenge, which I find, especially when it comes to complexity and cognitive load.
Yeah, I totally agree. And this is where you have to find the right use case.
Mhm.
And the the challenge is for all of us, we're having to fight the hype cycle. Like us like folks boots on the ground, those kinds of things, like you have to fight the hype cycle. And there are plenty of people out there saying how, oh, well, we're better pack your bags because all of you are going to be out of a job next year. There is this level of kind of FOMO at these kind of non-technical executive layers, and being able to balance the idea of showing value without going too far off the risk chart. And this is where I start leaning into like some of the metric stuff, and I know we're going to chat about that at some other time, but like identifying the waste and friction that are in people's way is the key towards actually making some of this happen. Like, you know, every survey I've ever done, documentation is always in the top 3. But that's a really broad term. Like, what's the actual problem? And in the past, we used to worry about creating a bunch of documentation. And, still people are using now AI tools to create a bunch of documentation. Do we actually need to do some of that? Is another, 10,000 pages in Confluence really going to help? Or what's the root of the problem underneath it? It's like, oh, what I actually need to know is more information about contract tests so that I can do my planning, and I don't have some kind of an incident because you changed your API and I didn't know about it. Like, that's the problem. Okay, cool. How can we figure out how to do that? Whether it's leveraging an AI tool or not, like that's the thing that's causing so much friction inside of your organization, and loss of time and all those other things. And like, yes, it's easy to try to throw AI at everything. It feels right now like it is a solution looking for a problem in a lot of ways, and not the other way around.
Right. I mean, there is definitely, it's like wild, wild west in AI today. I mean, definitely there's a
Mhm.
lot more hype going on, but like, I do believe there is a lot of use cases and like value created with
Yeah.
AI, right? Maybe touching on metrics a little bit or otherwise, can you think of a framework that organizations can use to reduce cognitive load at the same time get true value from AI without the hype?
Yeah, to me, it's all about having a really good supporting platform. That's the only way you're actually going to be, in my mind, successful in a lot of these things. Like, how do you have good platform engineering that can not only abstract away the problems, but also give you back curated information that reduces that cognitive load? And it's like, we have 15 different tools in our pipelines and DevSecOps stuff. Well, instead of needing to know how to interact with all of them, abstract that problem away into your platform, have easy, easy ways to be able to interact with it via your pipeline, but then, have some kind of agent that sits on top of it that says, hey, tell me about the problems in which you found inside of this issue. Like, oh, hey, there's a 80-page report I got out of SonarQube to tell me all of the problems that I have about my application. Well, tell me the things that I should actually care about. And, the platform team can curate that agent to be able to focus on the things that matter. That says, hey, you're trying to move, you can do this when you're in, your development environment, that this isn't going to fly when it comes to production. Okay, cool. It's not going to stop you from, moving it into here, but now you know that there's something in the way and you're going to have to go fix that. There is ways of bringing AI into the fold with a lot of these things, but it's not, in my opinion, generally the leading problem. And so if you think about it from that platform perspective and just take that same type of thinking and just apply it over and over and over and over and over again, you're going to end up building a really good experience for people because you don't have to worry about it. Something so simple, but yet I see like very problematic everywhere, is something as simple as auth NOC. Well, I'm saying it's simple like it's nothing, but like we've been trying to do this for 20 years now, and yet so many people struggle with it. Great. Abstract that problem away and think about it in a different way, and don't just, oh, maybe we could do AI.
I remember somebody saying is the best platform is the one which developers don't even notice exist. It's kind of like mostly ambient, but at the same time, it's so integrated in your workflow that you get the right information when you need it. Many of these AI tools are evolving. It's possible, hopefully, well, we'll see how it goes. It's possible with, especially with MCPs, that you maybe only have a single interface to interact with all of them, right? So all of those things still exist, but you can potentially reduce the surface layer, which essentially helps reduce the cognitive load that the developer has to worry about, right? So you can kind of like, as developers, you can still ask questions directly, maybe in your cursor terminal or like, your any of those like MCP clients, and everything is then connected through those systems, which brings you all the information that you need. And then AI is smart enough to actually be able to only surface the information you need as opposed to everything, right? Like I believe if we do it well, that the whole idea of these like static dashboards will over time go away. Yeah. And I think it just should really be, ask the right questions to get the information versus just start staring at tons of dashboards.
Yeah, I think the day of the dashboard is long over. But again, I'll go back to like, you can only abstract away complexity, you can't remove it. So right. Like what is the benefit of having a dashboard? Well, it's a curated point of view that has a curated data set that you took out of probably a mass complex, like, set of complexity inside of a data set somewhere, curated it into a query, and then you were able to, put that together into some kind of dashboard. Well, do you have a good enough data model to allow for an LLM to be able to reason against all of that? Maybe. Do you have, this, like, all of that rigor at that level? All you've done is just you've abstracted it out of that UI layer, and you're now putting it all on top of the data layer without the human in the middle to be able to reason against it and give you exactly what you're looking for. And, one of the problems that can come from that, if that data model's not right, it will very confidently lie to you and tell you that, your metrics all look great. Everything's just fine. Look at this little chart that I made. Everything's green and all the arrows point up. But what it actually did was it missed a completely half of the actual data it should be calculating. That was all of the problem. And you, as the end user, would never know that Because like right now, a lot of us can look and go, well, yeah, of course, I know the data model. I know that's wrong. What is it like? What's this thing smoking? Like, I don't know. But if you play this movie forward another year, 2, 3, 5 years, and take even if you take major advancement in AI out, like people are going to be less and less connected to those data models because they don't have to be. Now all of a sudden, you're not going to be able to know if it's right or wrong. And so, okay, well, that's a problem with some of that type of thinking. I'm not saying that it's not where the directions of the world's heading, because it totally is, but you need to get your data correct if you're going to do that, because it's this new layer of risk that kind of existed before, but again, you could ignore it, because if Chris was the one that did the query, built the report that then got us a $500 million regulatory fine, you fire me. Well, you can't fire an agent and you can't fire an LLM. And the only person that's accepting that risk is you as an organization. So great. You got to get a lot better at that. And so you may not be building Tableau dashboards, but you are going to be building a data mesh and really good application data models and all of the other bits that go along with it. That, as well, we both probably very well know, a lot of that stuff is garbage. And that's the stuff that's going to have to get cleaned up.
Right. I mean, you're already touching a little bit on this. Maybe we can do a quick view on metrics and understanding the impact of AI. So, obviously, there are like a few aspects to it. One is a lot of AI's value is hard to measure directly. Like, if you kind of like even do surveys, there's a lot of like sentiment in the surveys, right? So, because like either people really hate it or people really love it, it's almost like restaurant reviews. Either it's all 5 stars or 1 stars.
That's right.
And at the same time, most AI coding tools are actually not incentivized to give you the right metrics, because they'll say, oh, like this is your acceptance rate in the AI suggestions, even if you accepted 1 line out of 20 that it produced, right? It will consider that as accepted. So how should organization think about metrics when it comes to, or like impact when it comes to using AI? Also, because even maybe leadership is not asking this today. I'm sure like CFO is going to start asking them in 6 months.
Yeah, that's a really great question that has quite a long answer, but I'll try to be as brief as I can. Like, you're only as good as your slowest part. There's like the kind of the, it's probably not a direct quote from Deming, but 90 to 95% of your success is built on the system that you're working in, and not so much the person that's involved with it. And so taking all of those things into account, like when you look at some of these AI metrics and you ask people via a survey, like a quarterly survey, how much time do you think you're saving on AI? When you ask them how much, like in more real time, like, hey, you just completed a PR, tell me how much time do you think you saved? Then when you look at the quantitative data that goes along with it, none of it correlates. Like when you ask like people in that quarterly survey, they tend to answer quite with rosy glasses, but they're also thinking about themselves personally. And it's like, oh, it saves me time. But when you start looking at it at more of a system perspective, it starts to go south, because it's like, oh, well, I created my PR and I did this faster, but now I'm waiting 3 days to get my PR reviewed. Then there's another whole nother testing thing that goes along with it. Then they found some issue in testing. Now it comes back to, and so when you like you end up with all of this churn inside of an engineering team or an engineering organization. And in a lot of places, it just chews up and spits out any savings that you're actually going to find at that lowest level. And this is essentially the root of the problem that I get calls on all the time. It's like, I need, why am I not getting value from my Gen AI? I went and bought a bunch of Copilot or bought a bunch of Claude Code or whatever. Like, why am I not seeing the value? And it's because guess what? Like the problem you have isn't needing faster typers. The problem you have is flaky pipelines, no testing strategy, poor documentation, organizational structures that throw up all of these different roadblocks towards actually getting to business value. Like that's your problem. needing Ankit to type faster, like it's great, but that's not the actual problem that you're having. And so, yeah, your team might be marginally faster at getting some of this stuff done. Unless you're removing all the rest of that stuff that's in your way, you're never actually going to see the value from it. And I know that wasn't exactly about metrics, but when you look at the metrics will bear that out. And so if you're thinking about a good metric strategy, you should be trying to identify those problems across the software delivery lifecycle and say, well, and this is what's actually stopping me from being successful and from gaining these realizations. And, one more anecdote, like I talked to somebody the other day and they needed to get 10% gain this year and 10% gain next year on productivity from engineering. And their whole theory was, we're just going to bring in Copilot. And again, I'm using Copilot generically. Like they're going to bring in Copilot, and that's what their whole thing they're going to get. And my response to him was that you'll probably get it the first year. Like you could, you could probably get 10% the first year. Second year, not so much, because you've already squeezed all the juice out of that lemon, and you're not actually fixing the root of the problem. You're just kind of give them a little bit of boost on the other side. And so until you get the fundamentals correct, you're going to be very limited on any of those gains.
Interesting. So if an organization, let's say kind of like a CTO or a VP of engineering, is being asked by, I guess, the board, why are you not using AI? And like, what's your AI strategy? How should they think about it? How should they kind of like go and tackle this today?
Yeah. I mean, this is always like, it depends on how much FOMO is involved, right? Because if they're coming to you and saying like, what's your AI strategy? I would say that that's the totally wrong question. Like if you're going to say like, hey, I need to gain 15%, 20% productivity, like, okay, like I think that's a more reasonable ask, because it's not saying you have to use AI to do this. So maybe me just, trying to draw like nuance into it, but the answer there is really to identify the pain that hurts the most. I would bet in a lot of organizations it has nothing to do with needing faster typers. And yes, you want to go buy Copilot licenses or Claude or whoever. Like I understand, like go get things like Cursor. You're going to get a lot more, in my mind, you're going to get a lot more value out of things like Cursor because they have the agents in it. You've got the context. You've got all of those different things that you can pull inside of it that are going to help you in a much better way than just, hey, here's a code-gen tool. So like you're going to get more out of that. But again, like that is moving more towards that use case. And so identify what that use case is and then fix it. Like you'd be surprised how many like we did an internal study not too long ago. And the amount of people that wait more than 2 minutes for their dev environment to reload is staggering. So every time I hit save and my environment needs to kind of reload so I can see my newest changes, they're waiting more than 2 minutes. And so what does that do? It causes you to not do it. It causes you to not like it causes all of this weird kind of, bad, just bad habits. And it's like, okay, great. Well, my laptop's about to light on fire because I have my, all of these things running in Minikube. And so like that kind of stuff is probably the problem. You would probably get 10% productivity gains if you went and bought everybody a new MacBook M4 instead of dealing with the 2019, Lenovo that's got an i4 or i3 or whatever they are on it, right? Like you would probably get more out of that. But nobody wants to hear that right now. They want to hear, oh, well, what can AI do for you?
Right. So in some ways, like maybe if I were to rephrase what you said, is most of the challenges in DevEx are still what we've been talking about for the last 20 years. Like, better delivery tools, platforms, like better debugging, better dev environments, better documentation. I feel like with AI, all that's happening is these cracks are showing up a lot more severely and becoming the more easily visible bottlenecks compared to how it was before this AI boom.
I kind of look at it this way of there's kind of four different archetypes that exist across engineering. There's kind of your coder, there's a software developer, there's a software engineer, and then there's your architects. And really what AI tools have done have pretty much automated the coder's job. Because if you're working somewhere just because you know Java and you're just cranking out Java widgets, I would be a little those folks exist, but I would say most people fall under the software developer of like you're working with complex systems, you're dealing with all kinds of complexities of the modern kind of engineering landscape. And as you move up that scale, the less and less valuable some of these tools are. And but it's a lot of the same problems we've had. It's just the barrier to entry has risen. It's like I saw an interesting demo the other day, and I'm not going to call this company out, but they're like, look, you can automate through. There's 5 different calls in this application that call a deprecated API, and I can go in with AI and I can make it all kind of go away, and it can refactor all of this stuff and it runs everything through it. Well, that's fine. It was actually quite expensive when you think about like the token usage and stuff like that. But then it's like, well, this was a task we would normally give to a junior developer to say, hey, like I need you to go in there, do this work that I don't feel like doing because it's super basic, but you're going to learn how to deal with a large code base and the complexities of it and understanding what's going on, get your tests and testing right. And you're going to be able to learn how to be a software developer and then an engineer and then an architect. And the fear that I have with some of this is that you're moving towards this layer of automation that's going to raise the bar so high that it's going to be very difficult for people to get into the space in the future.
Mm-hmm. Interesting. Okay, so clearly AI is changing a lot of this, and
Yeah.
we are out of time now. So, Chris, thank you so much, and hopefully, listeners, will be able to understand and maybe reason about on their AI strategy and how to think about developer experience in AI. And I'm sure we will come back in 2 months and have a completely different take on this. So, for now, let's wrap it up here. Thank you so much, Chris, for your time. This was a pleasure conversation.
It's always wonderful chatting with you. Thanks.